Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. Ryan Coutts. How you doing, Ryan?
Good, Tyler. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. Thanks for coming on. We connected, feels like a few lifetimes ago, and finally the day has arrived. I'm excited, as my audience knows, I always am, to learn more. And you have an interesting role, and you play in an interesting space that I'm always curious about from the outside. You're the Digital Entertainment Accelerator Lead at Bow Valley College. That's a big mouthful, but I'm going to turn it over to you to let us inside the tent. What's your role all about? And kind of let's unpack this cool program in the world you live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tyler. So first of all, thanks for having me this morning.
My pleasure.
Yeah, my role is, it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting, very sort of niche here at Bow Valley College. So like you say, Digital Entertainment Accelerator Lead. My role at the college is essentially to run a accelerator program, business accelerator program, focusing on developing the creative or digital creative economy here in Calgary. So that focuses on basically three specific areas: game development, esports, and film and animation.
Game, esports. How's the and pretty equally weighted, kind of thinking about the way you guys present them, but maybe demand or what you're seeing in the market. Like, I appreciate the three pillars. How do those kind of net out in terms of balance?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So so far we've seen a ton of intake actually, in our sort of recruitment efforts for the program. Currently we're at just about 150 applications for the second year. We launched our first year last year in September. So we started last year with game development and esports. Both had pretty decent intake, but definitely a little bit more on the game development side of things. And I think part of that is just due to, where those sort of industries are, which, we'll probably talk about here in a little bit. But both film and animation and game development, a little bit further advanced here in Alberta, and esports being relatively new, a little bit more nascent. So that's kind of the spread that we're seeing so far. Lots and lots of intake in film and animation, though, which, probably doesn't surprise you because we've had a lot of really cool film TV projects here in the city or in the region. So.
And, I know your early days, this is only kind of your second cohort. Do you see a direct correlation to, there's some media or there's some buzz about films being produced here, and then all of a sudden you get a wave? Like, is it that? I'm being very binary with that question. I've realized. I saw, something in the news and I signed up yesterday. But to your point, that does make a difference. I see it, I can believe it, I get inspired by it, and maybe I go pursue it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think like what you're talking to, I think I usually refer to as sort of being like a champion organization or a champion project, right? Where people see something like that and they're like, oh, someone else has done this and they can be successful at it. Like that's cool.
The art of the possible gets realized, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, projects like The Last of Us, of course, was a huge project that came here.
Well, you're bridging two worlds. You're coming from the game world and you've got the gamer, and now you're bringing it into like the full entertainment world, which is even more mainstream than the gamer culture. Yeah. That's an interesting crossover.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And interesting too, because a lot of the time those sort of medium crossovers don't necessarily hit as well as people hope sometimes, especially between like games.
I've watched movies. A few movies or shows or entertainments after video games. A lot of them are terrible. Yeah. So just leave. We won't name names, but a lot of them are very poorly executed. And you go in with a lot of excitement. Halfway through the first episode, you're like, "This is garbage. What is going on? What am I watching?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's it's a tricky balance in thinking about different audiences. And how did you find your way into this? I'd love to, geek out a little bit on some of these different sectors and even where they're happening globally. But how long have you been in the role, and how did you find your way into it?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a bit of a sort of back and forth story, which I think probably a lot of entrepreneurs do. I've only been at the college since June, so coming up on a year now. But I actually ended up in the role due to my work that I was doing with the Alberta Esports Association.
Okay.
And so my background is more esports related than it is game dev or film or animation. But I'm one of the founding team members of the Alberta Esports Association, which started in 2020, pandemic actually being sort of a catalyzer for that. And so through that work with the Alberta Esports Association, which, for audience listeners, of course, the provincial esports, it's pretty much a provincial sport organization focused on developing the esports ecosystem. Cool. And so through that work, I had actually had some influence on a little bit of the programming and resources built out at Bow Valley. We had a bit of a sort of business relationship already happening. And so based on my sort of entrepreneurial background, when they had this role come up saying, hey, we need somebody to help run a program, a business accelerator program, teaching entrepreneurs how to do this stuff, it was kind of a natural fit. So
interesting. Does that industry struggle with, and this is my words, the business side of it. Like there's the creativity and there's the artist aspect of game dev and esports. But to make any of these viable or sustainable or a career choice, there has to be a business model behind it. And often, even working in marketing, I've worked with creatives for years. Their brain doesn't necessarily think that way. And sometimes they don't even, there's no interest in the business side of making this viable. They're just so excited. And there might be an argument that actually might hurt the creativity. And what have you seen kind of in the balance of those? Because it sounds like you're living in the middle is what I'm picking up. You're in the cross section of those two disciplines, of those two very sometimes opposing disciplines.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. And whether it's esports, game dev, film and animation, though, like all those different things, they all kind of face the same problem where, like you say, someone's creative, they have a really cool idea, they really want to sort of get it out there, they have a story that they need to tell, and that's great, and there's obviously a lot of sort of value to that, but sometimes figuring out how to actually make that happen, in a sort of realistic, tangible way, right? You need resources, you need, partners or team members, whatever it's going to look like. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're focused. And that's one of the reasons why doing this at Bow Valley College is actually really cool because, Bow Valley has a lot of academic programs related to animation, film development, game development, things like that. And so those programs are great for developing the technical skills that are required to do that work. Okay. But then my program is a sort of opportunity for people going through that to now figure out how to take an idea, a product, and turn it into something that's actually viable and out there, get it into market,
I do. I appreciate it. So who's your cohort? 150 applications for your next round. Who's applying? Is it, I've been in this game for a while and I need to go back? Am I new and excited and the world is my oyster? Like, I'm assuming there's a pretty eclectic mix inside those applications.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have a lot of students because, obviously Bow Valley College has academic programs that touch on these fields as well.
And that's who's getting exposed to it, that it's even existing, right? They're already there. They're already in the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have some students. We actually do have some, instructors or professors or other, staff at the college that are like, hey, I've had this idea for a long time. Maybe off the side of my desk, like, is this something I can sign up for? And the program is open to almost anybody. Cool. So there's very few restrictions on who's actually eligible. The biggest thing that we're looking for is people who are actually committed to incorporating a business, which is, a requirement of graduating the program. But lots of students, lots of teachers, and a lot of industry folk too. It is an industry-facing program. So signing up for it doesn't make you a student. You don't have to be a student to sign up for it or anything like that. So it's pretty versatile. It's really just anybody who wants to start a business in those industries, they can go ahead and get in there.
You used the word committed. You need to be committed to starting a business. Sometimes there's an idea of what that's going to be like. Then I learn and realize, whoa, this is not what I thought, or I had visions of something else. When you're in the screening or in the application process, how do you identify committed? That's a tricky one. Maybe I'm asking you a kind of a weird question there.
Yeah, it's a really important question to ask though, because it's really difficult to tell sometimes what somebody is able to commit or what they want to really do or get out of it. One of the biggest things that I try to emphasize when I'm in those recruitment meetings is really letting people know that you do have to incorporate to finish this program. And so, if you're not ready to do so, maybe take a step back and sort of, simmer on the idea for a little bit, see how that goes. That's a big piece. There was
to their defense there's also going to be so much learning that happens, which is the whole point of the program.
Yeah.
So from when I start to when I need to incorporate, what's the timeline? So I'm getting way in the weeds with you here, Ryan.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's totally fine. The program is 12 weeks long.
Okay.
If you already have an incorporated company, you can still sign up for it. So you don't. Need to start.
That's cool. Thanks for that's a good. It doesn't, because sometimes you're like, oh, only fresh content allowed, or you can't already be doing it. That's not the case here.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a little sort of back and forth. But basically, if you have a new idea or a new project or sort of line of business that you want to launch, then you can sign up for the program multiple times.
Okay. So it's pretty inclusive that way. It's pretty open.
Yeah, definitely. And especially there, like last year we had a company come through that had been in operation for 8 or 9 years already in the game development space, but they wanted to sort of pivot a little bit of what they were doing and sort of focus on a new sector, a new audience a little bit, and create a new line of business that way. And so they came through the program and they sort of incorporated a separate basically a separate arm of their existing business. So something like that is totally eligible as well.
I really respect that, and really the message that sends as a company, like you're never too old to learn new tricks, and too old to put yourself into a situation where you've got to go back to the basics. Like I have a lot of respect for someone who's like, I've got an idea on a napkin and I'm serious about it, or I've been doing this for a while, and you know what? I don't know my blind spots. I got to learn. I'm open to things. I think each one can be equally challenging and daunting in a different way. Yeah,
100%. And, with programs like this, there's, it's always interesting because there's the content that you learn, right? There's the stuff that we have industry speakers come in and speak to whatever the topic happens to be. Things like that, the tangible skills. We talk about how to pitch a business properly and, things like that. But a lot of the value from it too is just building the relationships with your peers in the cohort and also with those industry speakers. One of the best things about running this program in Calgary, and I'm born and raised in Calgary, so I obviously am a little bit biased, right?
That's okay. This is a very pro Calgary podcast. Just
there you go.
You're in the right place, man. You're in the right place.
Yeah, definitely. But one of the best things about doing a program like this in Calgary is that the startup world here is just so unbelievable. Like there's so much collaborative.
I love it. I tout this. I sing this praise high. So when someone validates it, I'm like, yes, okay. the willingness to support, the willingness to follow through. If you say you're going to intro somebody, you probably like 90% will do it. I've heard so many things from even some recent startups I had on that moved here from somewhere else specifically for that. And I was like, is it still true for you? And they're like, it's been our experience. We're 6 months. And so it's not just those of us who are drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, and it's a cultural thing, right? I mean, we talk about, Calgary always talks about sort of resilience and the whole hell or high water kind of thing, right?
Yep.
But people really just want to see each other succeed, and there really is something special about the way that we embrace entrepreneurial thinking and innovation here in the city. I think there's so many resources available. There's so many people who want to connect and help. Sometimes it's even almost overwhelming. It's like, how do I navigate all this?
It's more about wayfinding than it is about being able to get help, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think when I go down to Platform, they've got that board of all the different resources and all the different. It's like it's cool and it's exciting and it's super overwhelming when you walk in and see like a million logos. It's not a million, but it feels like that when you look at
the big like 10 by 10 sort of banner thing.
100%.
Right, or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, 1,000 companies on it.
How many people were in your first, because you're going into your second one, how many people were in your first cohort being last September?
Yeah, so last year we launched from September to November. So like you said, our first cohort. In that one, we only had game development and esports. Part of that was because we were building out a production hub on campus at Bow Valley College,
cool.
Which is going to sort of tie into that film and animation stream. But so for the first cohort, we had 19 companies. All 19 graduated. We had 0 attrition, so that's pretty exciting.
You beat me to my next question.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really exciting. Most of it was game development, a couple good esports companies as well, but some really, really cool ideas. And, whenever it comes to something that's very project-based, like game development, for example, right? A lot of people sort of hobbyists that maybe want to just launch a game, get it into market.
Yep.
But we saw some really innovative and interesting takes on how to like what kind of products people were trying to make, not just necessarily trying to tackle something like being the next Call of Duty or something like that,
right.
But really sort of thinking about a little bit outside the box in terms of what problems
like
they want to be solving.
More niche audience, more specific. Like as everything gets bigger, I always joke you can open a craft dinner restaurant, craft dinner only restaurant in New York because the 0.some% of the population is still big enough to support the restaurant.
Yeah.
Versus you open that in Calgary and 12 people would be really excited, but that's probably not a viable business case.
Yeah.
As these worlds expand, there's more opportunity for kind of that unique thinking, and there's enough people that'll think that your unique thinking is also cool.
Yeah.
Talk to me about. I think about game development and I think about developing a game, and that's my own binary. When I think about esports, am I developing ways for audiences to engage? Am I putting leagues together? It feels like there's more diversity there. My brain can't clearly identify what that might be as easy as when I think about a game, someone who's doing game dev.
Yeah, well, and you're totally right about that. And I think that's sort of a big factor in why the industry is a little bit sort of still nascent is so many people out there are still trying to understand like what is esports.
Too many angles on the angles.
Yeah, exactly. I've talked about this a lot over my last 5 years or whatever doing advocacy work with AESA, but when it comes to esports, it can be a lot of different stuff, right? So like you say, launching a league, owning a team, something like that. The best way that I tend to think about it is think about all the different jobs or careers or businesses that exist in the traditional sport ecosystem.
Yeah.
Basically, all of those can exist in esports as well. So coaching, merchandise, sponsorship, marketing, kind of stuff like that. Branding, media, performance management, like anything like that can sort of tie into esports. So what I find is a lot of people, when they think about esports, they really just tend to think of the competitive side.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to own a team, or I'm going to be a pro player, or maybe I'll be a content creator, or event management. A lot of stuff in esports, as you would probably expect, happens around the world of events. So a lot of that sort of ties in, but it really could be a lot of different stuff.
Is there any limitations? Like, obviously, esports, you can be anywhere, you can compete. You and I were joking, getting on. I've got all these gaming headsets. Which one do I grab? Like, it's borderless, but I know they still host events. Is being in Western Canada, is that a disadvantage in any way for someone? And again, maybe it depends on which angle of esports, but just broadly speaking, is there any advantage or disadvantage being in Western Canada versus other parts of the world where maybe this is just there's a bigger critical mass of people involved?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd say relative to the rest of Canada, I think the rest of Canada, Western Canada, is actually in a pretty good spot right now.
Okay. I've often heard that, but I just kind of hear it on the fringe because I'm not directly involved.
Yeah. Traditionally, a lot of any of these sort of creative industries or tech-related industries tend to sort of pop up a little bit more and faster in places like Vancouver and Toronto, right?
Different back to density, right?
Yeah, exactly, density and things like that. But Alberta has a massive grassroots scene for esports, and so that's kind of where we're at right now, is really trying to connect and engage with that space in a really genuine way, of course, and then sort of help bring that talent together and elevate it to sort of the next stage of what the industry could look like. That's a big focus of the program, actually, is how do we connect with people who are already engaging in the space, who know it, who love it, right? How do we help them sort of reach their goals for what they want to do with it? Because there are a lot of career options here. Sometimes it's just difficult to get good line of sight on what that could be and then how to actually get there.
Is that an industry that's kind of excited to evolve? And when say I haven't been in the industry for a few years and I see something like Bow Valley pop up, am I excited about that? Do I wish I was consulted more? Is it territorial a little bit? I'm not sure what I'm asking. It's not like, it's gangland behavior on the schoolyard. But no, I'm just like, when something's really grassroots, people get really invested and they're really bought in and they got a lot of heart and soul. And I really appreciate that. And sometimes when things start to grow, there's transition periods that can be uncomfortable. Or back to your point about inclusion and willingness to help. It's like, no, thank goodness there's more people actually care about this space than just the 10 of us. Or, I'm obviously exaggerating for effect, but does that make sense? And have you seen any of that? Or is it, let's rising tides lift all boats kind of mindset?
Yeah, definitely. Gamers tend to be very passionate about whatever it is that they're interested in, right? And that's a good thing, I think, generally speaking. But it's really important that when you are engaging with those communities, you do so from a genuine angle, right? Nobody wants to feel like they're being sold to or taken advantage of. But if you really sort of are able to listen to what people are trying to do and what they want, what their goals are,
you mean basic humanity, right? Being a good human. Sorry, it sounds cliche today when you have to deliberately, but we live in a crazy world. But for you, coming from that space, getting into this program, it's almost like one of our own is involved in like assuming, being able to talk the right language and understand what the pain points actually are. Yeah. Because sometimes organizations try to solve problems, but they didn't, I always joke, don't fall in love with the problem, fall in love with your audience's version of the problem. And sometimes that gets gapped, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
With good intentions. Again, not saying anyone's going out to do anything shitty.
Yeah. But, I think you're right about that, because things get so complex so quickly, and it's really easy to sort of fall, you get into the weeds of what the process is going to look like or what the outcomes are going to look like or whatever it is. And you kind of lose sight of ultimately whatever it is that you're trying to do. And, and we talked about this a little bit of already with the sort of Calgary culture of collaboration, right? But like, it's all about the people, right? Everything is about the people that you work with, people that you get to support, and sort of helping them reach their goals. So, as long as you don't lose sight of that, right? Those relationships, then
don't let the process break the intention.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
totally. A good way to put it.
Thinking about, wasn't there a few years ago, and this is me pulling back into my memory of the government in Alberta making some moves that were detrimental to the gaming industry. I think removing certain tax incentives and funding around, maybe it was even the IRAP program. I can't remember exactly what the details were. What's kind of your view of the landscape in terms of, I know that there's been some external support, from some local organizations of your program. What without turning this into a political conversation, but it does, is the government either is paving the road or putting up roadblocks, it feels like. Yeah. What's your feeling about how the industry looks at kind of what our province does, even right down to what our city does to support this?
Yeah, definitely. So, I can't really speak too much to like the political scene necessarily, and especially some of the programming that you were talking about. came out a couple years ago, I think now, and when I was mostly involved in esports, and some of that stuff didn't necessarily hit the esports scene as much, again, because more sort of sports
I remember it being
related.
very vocal for a period of time, and then it kind of like anything drifts, but doesn't mean the problem went away or the groups that didn't feel supported now do or don't.
Yeah. I mean, what I can say though is this program is supported by the OSIF grant, which is really, really exciting. And so that's basically an opportunity for municipal stakeholders to invest in these ecosystems, right? So, the creative digital sector, obviously encompassing, I'm going to say the three pillars like 100 times in this conversation.
That's
right?
okay.
But film and animation, game dev, esports,
do it.
Right?
When your audience gets annoyed, I've been told that's when they start to hear you. So just keep saying it. It's totally, because now someone's like, what did he say? What are the three pillars? So no problem.
Yeah. So I mean, this program is really is an opportunity for like you say, municipal stakeholders to get involved and sort of see what's what opportunities out there and how they can help, right? So we've been really lucky to be able to work with them, and they've been really great so far.
I appreciate that, and having some funding, and this is only your second cohort. That's good. I forgot. I didn't forget, but just when we've last chatted, you were just finishing, because we chatted last fall. You were just kind of finishing up the second one. When does the finishing up the first one? When does the second one kick off? When does it start?
Yeah. So great question. We're changing the structure a little bit from the first year. So this year, what we're planning to do is run 3 separate cohorts, one for each industry stream specifically.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Because if I'm in esports, I'm not in film, and if I'm in film, I'm not in game dev.
Exactly.
They hang out together, but they are uniquely different.
Yeah, they are. And it's interesting. A lot of the people who have actually applied for the program have expressed interest in signing up for multiple.
Cool.
So I want to do game dev, but I want to make a game that has some esports components to it, and then sort of eventually branch into the world of esports or something like that, right?
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that you could do from a sort of long-term perspective. But one of the things that I want people to understand when they come through the program is really how to like hone in and focus on a singular value proposition and understand what is it that my business is actually trying to do.
Discipline of focus. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. Because every entrepreneur is guilty of this. All they want to do is solve every problem for everybody.
and often in a very excited way.
yeah, exactly. But that doesn't always necessarily work out from a business perspective. So
yes, when you start, what's a hobby? What's a value proposition? And then what is truly a business?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so splitting them into 3 different cohorts, I really like that. So I joined the program. Is it broken into, like, at the beginning? Is it broken into segments in terms of like module 1, like what is your value proposition? Who is your audience? Like putting my marketing hat on and the business plan hat. I'm assuming that by the end of this, they've got a pretty sussed out business plan. Yeah. Often I would imagine they come in with the technical chops. I know how to build a game. I don't know how to do any of the rest of the things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you're totally right. It's kind of broken into like loose phases, I guess you could say. We do weekly sessions, right? So like I said, 12-week program. Every week we'll sort of cover a different topic.
What's the time commitment? Just think again, if I'm listening and I'm thinking about joining, and maybe I have a job or a busy life, is this something I can do off the side of my desk, or is it a full-time commitment?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, because it's an industry-facing program, we want to make sure that it's open to anybody who would be interested in signing up for it. So we run our sessions in the evening. This year, they're mostly going to be about 6 to 9 o'clock p.m. On site at Bow Valley College, because doing this kind of stuff in person, I think is pretty important. Right, building those relationships in that community together. But yeah, basically only a couple hours a week for the courses, for the sessions themselves. But then, almost like any program, you get what you put in. You get out of it what you put into it, right? So you can come do the sessions. We don't necessarily assign homework per se, but what we do try to do is sort of challenge and push people to take action on the things that they're trying to do. So for example, if you were in a content program about project management, right, continuing education, that might be the kind of program that you sign up for because one day you might want to get a job in project management. So it's just kind of like a certificate that you can kind of throw on your LinkedIn profile or whatever. And like maybe one day you'll use it, maybe one day you won't. Again, this program is about people who are committed to starting a business. Okay. So for example, we might have a session on validating what your product is or your product market fit, seeing if people actually want to engage with it. And so at the end of that session, we might say, okay, we've talked about all this content. We've talked about how to validate. Before next week, I want you to go out and talk to 10 or 15 potential customers.
Oh, so super practical.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's really about, it's not necessarily just sort of business theory. It's like, go do it. You want to start a business? Why are you not?
And create some accountability of, go and do it and come back and report on what you found in a week from now.
Yeah. I find a lot of people, there's always, and it can be for a lot of reasons, but there's always a little sort of underlying hesitance to actually like just get out there. But at the same time, I think the key to being a successful
it's
entrepreneur
it's a bit risky sometimes, right?
Yeah,
Put yourself
it's
out there.
scary. Yeah.
You know, the creative side of things, and even I write articles sometimes about curiosity and some of the stuff I'm really passionate about. I have those little moments of like, whoa, I wonder if people are going to like it. Like there still is that humanity to it, where it's like, oh, it's just business, put it out there and do the thing. Especially when you're building something with a degree of like, this came from you, this is an idea, you birthed it out, and now here it is, or whatever that looks like. That was too graphic. And then like, oh, what if they don't like it? Like there is a vulnerability to that I think it's easy to overlook and just make it about business, but we're still humans, right? And it's a bit messy sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and so that's one of the reasons why in the program, I mentioned earlier, we try to teach people how to pitch their business a little bit. And that can sound really formal. Obviously, there's this whole idea of like all these different sort of key points you need to have in your
10 slides or less, only X amount of font size, only so many words on a slide. Like it can be very mechanical, right?
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of that too is just helping founders feel comfortable and confident talking about whatever it is they want to do. Yeah. If you're going to be a founder for a company, you specifically need to be the number one salesperson for it. But that can be really scary for a lot of people. A lot of people aren't necessarily as outgoing or extroverted, or they don't want to talk to people. But again, going back to that example,
often not why they got into it in the first place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I got into it because I like doing this. I don't want to have to do that, but yet no one's going to sell or promote or tell your story better than you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So helping people sort of get comfortable and used to that, I think is really important if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur. But again, it goes back to the people side of things too. So that example with validation, right, where we tell people go out and talk to people. It's not necessarily just about sending a bunch of cold calls or cold emails or LinkedIn messages or whatever, but like try to meet somebody for coffee, have a conversation with them, develop that person-to-person relationship. And then the more you do that, the more you sort of get comfortable with it, and the more impact that's going to have if you can actually build a relationship with somebody, right? A genuine relationship.
And back to your point earlier about, Calgary does have some advantages because I think it's easier to do that than in other cities, because if someone says they will meet you or help you or offer up something, I do find people have a tendency to follow through. And I've fact checked this many times. Like, no, I have friends who are from Alberta and they've spent some time in Toronto and then Vancouver. And they're like, my buddy used to call it the Van Groovy special, where everyone would be like, yeah, for sure. Like, let's go for coffee. And they do the winks and guns joke that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And he goes, I go to Calgary and someone's like, I'll introduce you to so-and-so. And before I even get home, they've sent an email introducing me to somebody. He goes, that's rare. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate that because it sounds so subtle and it sounds so like, not a big deal. That, like I always joke, nothing much in life happens without a relationship. And it's hard to get a relationship if you don't get out there and talk to people.
100%. Yeah. It
sounds so obvious when you say it out loud, but it's such a real thing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. One of my previous sort of business development mentors that I worked with in a previous role, one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me was that, and this sticks with me forever, very simple, is just people do business with people, right? And as long as you can remember that and keep in mind that no matter what the situation is, no matter who you're talking to, there's always a person there. They're dealing with their own issues in life or their own successes or their own stresses or whatever it is, right? And I think going back to that cultural piece, that's something that Calgary does really well. The startup ecosystem here is coming from that lens of sort of empathy and compassion. And I think that's why people like to help each other so much,
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. And how long until we're dealing with our AI agents are doing a podcast? I think we're a little way. I think we're a little ways off that right now.
Yeah.
What do you guys do to create? You've said it before, community and who you meet. We've talked about that so much, and coming back to the basics. Like, is there something you guys do deliberately? And I've seen some programs do it well, maybe some do it less well. I'm not going to say bad, but you've got that first cohort that went through, last year, and then you've got this new cohort. Do you deliberately try to create collisions between those groups to just try to build more of, hey, we've got something in common. Went through this program. What did you learn? Where are you? Like kind of mentorship or just connection? I'm assuming that's a big, again, it's so easy to say, but it's hard to do at scale sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So there's a few different sort of ways that we sort of tackle that problem or address that, I guess. So, the first thing is, Bow Valley was really strategic in who they hired for these roles, right? And I don't want to sort of blow smoke or anything like that, right? But my background is on the esports, the community side of esports. Mike Lowhouse, who is the manager of a lot of these of the Digital Entertainment Nexus or the DEN project, he sort of oversees a lot of this different stuff. His background is, again, on the grassroots community side of game development, right? And so because I
see the strategy forming. I like
it. Exactly, right? Pulling people in from the community who have those relationships, right? Who sort of understand what those needs are and what they they want and how to sort of support them.
Well, back to our comment
really
earlier, the perception of credibility. Oh, there's this program spinning up. No one talked to us about it, versus actually, no, we went out and we actually engaged people from those communities so that we knew that we were authentic and accurate, and that what we were creating was something that was actually going to be of value to the community.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah. Credibility is a huge thing. And again, being genuine with those sort of relationships, right? With those conversations. It's interesting that you brought up another interesting point, though, and this is one of the reasons why in the first cohort we had a blend of game development and esports together, is about creating those collision points, right? And it's so funny, like your name for this podcast is perfect, because collisions, again, we've talked so much about, people and relationships and sort of all that kind of stuff, right? And I know that Platform, for example, right, they label themselves as a collision space, right?
Absolutely.
It sounds so buzzwordy, but at the same time, like, it's true, and it really helps.
It's required, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's absolutely required.
Yeah. So the more that we can
build
up that
Pixar,
community,
putting the bathroom in the middle, make it like, there's endless examples of it, right? In organizations, that it was like, if we don't force these people to collide, they might not ever talk, and if they don't talk, they're not going to come up with Toy Story in that case, right? Or whatever the legend is around some of those, movies that we all take as table stakes. But somewhere, somebody in a boardroom banged in somebody else, and they came up with a cool idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes that's all it takes to change the world a little bit, right? So.
Yes. It all starts with an idea.
Yeah.
Touching on the fact that OSIF is involved with you guys, economic impact. You look at businesses created, jobs created. I know obviously jobs is a big factor for a lot of those, economic development engines. Certainly in Canada, or Calgary, but everywhere. Did we put more jobs? Did we drive more taxable revenue? Did we move the needle? I invested taxpayers' dollars here, or provincial money or federal money. What was the outcome? Do you have longer term numbers that you guys are focusing on?
Yeah. So obviously the program is pretty new, so I don't have any numbers that I can necessarily share yet. But obviously the intention is for any of the companies that come through the program. It is, like I said, it's a requirement to be incorporated. So those companies are going to be in market.
These are going concern businesses.
Yeah. And then we'll be staying in touch, and part of it again is that community building side of things, right? Staying in touch and just bringing in alumni and new participants and everything like that. But we'll be talking to them and understanding, how much capital have they raised, how many jobs have they created, and stuff like that. But the cool thing to think about, and this is sort of where my mind goes, thinking about the future and the opportunity, the economic impact, right? I mentioned that we have 150 companies that already applied. If you think of the definition of a small, medium business, right, an SME, or enterprise, I suppose, small, medium enterprise, right, being on average, let's say like 50 employees, right? Well, if you think that all those companies are going to go out there and eventually hit that number, 150 times 50, like how many jobs is that, right? What's that economic impact looking like? So,
even you think about the last 5 years in Calgary, as you talked about our startup ecosystem. When I started this podcast back in 2019, it was a very different conversation. There was like, I'm not saying there wasn't people that were doing it. I talked to some of the OGs, and they're like, hey, there was a tech scene before the last 5 years, but the mainstream, the common language, the places like, I remember when Terry Rock was on the show, and after we got off air, he's like, Tyler, we're going to build the thing. Like, it's not announced yet, but it's going to happen. Now I feel old, but that was only 5 years ago that I had that conversation. And now it's this, something we can point to your point about, you can go there right now and there's people banging into each other, sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, it didn't exist. And what the energy sector did with the plus 15, anyone I know works in the energy sector, I'm like, if you want to run into other people in the sector, just walk around the plus 15. How did we do that? And places like Startup, and I know there are sort like Platform, and there's others for sure, not to give them all of the love for it, but those weren't around in the same way they were 4 or 5 years ago, in specifically in the tech startup scene, non-energy. We'll kind of blanket one or the other. I love that our city has more horses in the race now than it did before, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a totally different world. Not to sort of talk about COVID necessarily, right? But like pre-COVID versus
it was a thing, Ryan. It was a thing. It's hard not to talk about it.
Hard not to address.
Can we look back and laugh yet? Is it like, was it trauma plus time equals celerity? Has it been long enough? Can we laugh? Or we still got a little? I'm laughing on one side, but I have a tear in the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're getting there, but maybe not
soon,
yet.
Not yet. Too soon.
Yeah.
Okay, too soon.
Yeah.
Where do you see things headed? Obviously, you're in your second cohort. You're in the role. Obviously, you've got a huge enthusiasm for it, and you're learning all the time. Like I heard you say loud and clear. We've made some changes. We're adapting. How many applications did you have for the first cohort?
So first cohort we had. Oh geez, I'm trying to remember now. I think we had close to about 50.
Okay, so you 3x that already.
Yeah, we had a lot already. A lot of them were looking to get into the film and animation side of things, though, obviously, which we weren't quite launching yet at that point.
You had to hold them back at bay for next round.
Back a little bit. Yeah. But in terms of moving forward, I mean, the program is going to be around till 2028 at a minimum.
Okay, cool. So you know now you have that runway. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, the program is free to sign up for. So anybody who's interested in checking it out, obviously.
That's powerful. That's a huge, because for a lot of times do I sign up for a program or do I pay for incorporation? Like, dollars matter for sure. They do at the early days. Every dollar matters always.
Yeah, 100%. And so just selling the program a little bit here, right? So the program is free to enter. We also do cover your incorporation cost. So not only is it free.
That wasn't a setup, by the way. I did not know that ahead of this call. I'm just going to lob the ball, Ryan, and you can just hit it out of the park.
Yeah, exactly. Some low-hanging fruit there, right? Yeah. It's free to incorporate, it's not free. We cover your incorporation costs.
That's amazing.
And then there's also a pitch competition at the end of the program.
Oh, okay, you beat me to my next question again. We're really in sync here.
Yeah.
I was like, where do potential investors get involved?
Yeah, so there's a pitch competition at the end of the program. We offer some cash funding as part of that competition. So the top 3 winners in each individual industry stream will get a certain amount of cash prizing. In cohort 1, we already handed out $60,000 worth of money to. I call it seed funding. It's not really seed, but basically it's cash.
It's money when you need it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's cash that you can invest into your business.
I think there's too many titles sometimes in the money. Is it seed? Is it pre-seed? Is it angel? Is it family? Is it pre-series A? Like you can get a little bit drunk on the terms even on how you do that. There's a series of money awarded for people who make it through and reach a certain level.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's very cool. And that's funded through Bow Valley directly.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. I love it because you guys are, there's lots of conversations I've had about, we've got these great, things in the city that help people incubate, but then there's kind of a cliff that they fall off at the end. And how do I keep going? And how do I get my first customer and keep that journey going? And, I find sometimes it's easier to put focus on certain, we really love the incubator and the accelerator phase, but that first customer phase, no, that's not us. We're going to stop here. But then there's the we'll only work with you once you've got customers or once you've got revenue. That gap in between, I think, can be really, really tough. And I've heard that from a lot of founders. You felt really supported, then all of a sudden you're cold, naked and alone, right? Like what's happening now?
Yeah.
So being able to pull that thread a little bit through, I think, can be really beneficial.
100%. Yeah. And you're totally right. It's easy to sort of get really excited at the very, very early stages, but then maybe you get 1 or 2 customers, but it's that sort of 1 to 10 or maybe like 1 to 100 customer sort of area that's like, well, hold on, how do I make that jump, right? Because it's going to take a certain amount of investment or time, or I'm not necessarily sure how to do it. So one of the things we try to talk about in the program, of course, going back to some of this business theory and validation and all that kind of stuff is I want people to graduate through the program and understand how you get a customer. Because once you know how to do that, then you can start getting another one and another one. So the pitch competition is really exciting, and it obviously gives people an opportunity to get a little bit of cash funding that they can invest into maybe hiring someone part-time or something like that, or buying some assets, some equipment, whatever it is that they need. But the point of the program isn't necessarily just to do the pitch competition. The point of the program, obviously, is to graduate feeling like you have the skills and the knowledge, to take your business to the next step to start selling. Yeah.
How is the difference between, I think game dev, I tend to think a little bit more business to consumer. I think esports, I think business to consumer, maybe B2B, because you've got, if someone owns a team, well, they need a PR group, or they need someone who can build, work on that. And I think of film, I think of that often as more of a B2B. You're not working with the end consumer, you're working with other studios, or am I making it too binary, or because those are different tracks, like selling your new game to 10,000 users online, very crowded, very challenging space to be in. Esports, your film, maybe you just need 1 or 2 customers to get started. Yeah. How's the balance between those two, and how do you juggle that even with the teaching it?
Yeah, really interesting point. So I think I think what it comes down to is, again, really trying to be clear on who you're selling to. Because if you're a game developer, you can create, almost anybody can get the tools online, probably for free to develop their own game, and then just put it on Steam, which is an online sort of marketplace platform, and theoretically make revenue off of it.
I think theoretically is the key word in that statement.
Yeah.
If you build it, they don't always come.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can do that, and sometimes it happens, right? What happens every once in a while is a game gets picked up by a really big streamer or content creator, and then it just explodes.
Like an Angry Bird story or whatever. A few of those stories, even if you're not in the space, you hear about them because they hit mainstream media.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But that's pretty uncommon, right? So, but if you're a game developer, maybe you want to go talk to a publisher, right, and get some like publisher backing, in which case it is more
kind of
B2B.
similar to kind of a book approach where you would have a publisher. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Sorry, so how little I know about this space.
Yeah. So in that case, you need to know how to sell your business, right? You need to know how to pitch it. You need to think about, what are your unit economics
and what's important to them, while also still not compromising what's important to you. And that could be a tricky balance right there.
Yeah, 100%. And every publisher is going to be a little bit different what they're looking for, right? Some publishers focus on very specific kinds of games that target different parts of the market or whatever, right? So, it can be a little bit nuanced, and that's part of what we actually help talk about in the program is we do get a lot.
How to navigate. Is that world kind of predatory? Like the publisher, to not to throw publishers under the bus in any way. I don't know enough, but oftentimes those power dynamics can seem predatory.
Yeah. I think it kind of depends. At least in game development, I actually don't know
who's on the other side, right?
Yeah. I can't really speak to the film and animation side as much because that's not my background. As I don't know that as closely. But I think in a lot of the AAA space, like the really big budget kind of stuff, the EAs and the Ubisofts and stuff, or Activision, they can be a little bit tricky to work with. But
because they have all the power and they know it.
yeah, they've been around for a long time and everything, right? So, but the nice thing about Calgary is that we're very indie focused, right? And again, that goes back to the community and the grassroots side of things. And so we're super, super scrappy. We've got a ton of really cool, interesting, creative indies, and helping them succeed, hopefully bringing them into the program has been really fun. So.
Okay, interesting. Oh, there's so many rabbit holes. Back to your three pillars. Each one has its own undertaking of kind of understanding the dynamics, and I think what I'm really hearing is like, well, let's show you the different ways you can get there. You can go direct to consumer. You can find a film company and you can be their main provider, or you can just get that pilot project so you've got that on your books and could show it. Because I'm sure like even in our world, who have you worked with? What work have you done? Show me some of your past projects. I'm sure that's a big cornerstone of all of these three pillars.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and so having in any creative industry, right? Having a healthy portfolio is really, really important. Yeah. And that's kind of where our academic programming comes into play, right? So, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but our academic programming, if you wanted to go into the, the animation program, for example, right? It'll give you a lot of different experiences and skill sets and tools to build out a portfolio of stuff, projects or things that you've worked on, right? Maybe even some internship, like some in-industry work. But then again, you've got that experience, you've got those tools. Now, if you want to start your own animation studio, what does that look like? How do you plan that out, right? That's where they would then maybe come into the accelerator program.
When you see we'll just pick on The Last of Us, they come to town to use our environment and to use our buildings and use our downtown. Do they also look to use our resources here? Like, I know there's extras and there's all some of the stuff that you just armchair know that they require, but these are organizations coming out of big centers where they have access to endless amounts of resources and well-established. Is there also, or is it a false narrative that when they come to town, they're also looking for some of these services at the same time, or are they already bringing their kind of cohort with them?
Yeah, great question. So, I think that's the goal. The more services and sort of talent that we have locally, the more that we can engage with some of those bigger projects. It's kind of a win-win, right? Because if those teams don't need to bother shipping all of their people and their equipment and paying for housing and et cetera, the more that they can just hire local, it's cheaper for them ultimately, right?
But hey, these are business decisions that are being made to film here, right? There's a reason why they choose it. And even now with the dollar and a lot of these coming out of the US, they're getting, if they know they can get the quality and it's at a good price, cheaper than what they'd spend at home. Yeah. But it's that trust that they still need the project to be, if it's a AAA project like The Last of Us, just using that was an easy one to point to.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and Calgary and region has we have our natural assets in terms of the geography, right? And, some really cool like city landscapes and things like that. But a lot of and again, getting back to the program, a lot of what we're trying to do here, and this is part of why OSIF wanted to invest in these programs, is not just lean on the physical resources that we have here in the region, right? In terms of but also the people and the talent and the skill set.
And keeping people in our city and giving them, I've heard in the early days of tech, like, it's hard to recruit somebody because they're not sure where their next job is. Yeah. But now I've heard it from people. They're like, that's less of a concern. People are like, if I move here, I can work here for my 18 to 24 months or whatever it is. And then there's somewhere else I can go. It makes it a lot easier to attract talent or to have people graduate in our system and go, I don't have to go to LA. I don't have to go to Vancouver. I don't have to go to wherever the case may be, Montreal, to find work. I can find it here. That's a powerful narrative as well. It wasn't that long ago, the headlines were about the talent train leaving Calgary back in 1819. That was a headline I talked about on the show multiple times. People don't talk about that the same way. Now it's gone the other way. People are being repatriated and coming back, but it's because they see more opportunity, right?
Yeah, 100%.
The mountains and the quality of life are nice, but I have to see it has to economically also make sense for me career-wise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's, and you put it really well talking sort of about the job, right? If somebody's going to maybe move to another city, right? It's not just about the job that they're moving there for. It's about what's the next job, what's the next step. And if they can't see that, then then maybe they'll come for a little bit, but they don't stick around, right? So a lot of this programming and stuff is really designed to help build out those industries so that people, when they do come, they can see what their next step and their next step after that and after that is going to look like. And there's those companies and those job opportunities available to support that, right? So a lot of this is really about drawing in talent into Calgary, and then nurturing it and bringing it up to another level.
Which really makes sense why OSIF is kind of stepped up to the plate and knowing what their mandate is and just economic Calgary CED in general and that whole group. Mm-hmm. How do we create more jobs here? How do we, it's great we have an influx of net new migration, but what are they doing when they get here? Mm-hmm. And making sure we've got those industries and people can stay here. And I'm very bullish on Calgary, as I'm sure anyone who listens to me at any extent you can tell. But even the projections of where our city's going, it's exciting, and it creates some challenges in some ways, but I tend to focus on the opportunities. And when people can get really excited about something they're passionate about and then be able to do it here, not because picking up and moving, the older you get, the harder that gets. Family, life, kids, all the things that keep you here that when you're young maybe are different, but having this opportunity, that's really exciting to me. I'm constantly surprised with the things going on right under our noses here, which is exactly why I do the show.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and it's so funny too, because there's so much happening here in the city, right? No matter what industry you're looking at. I mean, in esports, right, there's some really strong talent that has come out of the city, or even out of Alberta.
That's so cool. And
right?
People you just don't know, but just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly.
I throw that, people are like, there's nothing going on here. I'm like, you're not paying attention. I call bullshit on that completely.
Yeah. I'll tell a very quick story, and this is a really interesting point, but it's kind of about Edmonton a a little bit more so than Calgary.
Okay, all right. No, sorry. I try to be inclusive.
We'll talk a little bit about Alberta here, but so the very first, so the visa that you need to go into the United States as a professional sports athlete is the P1A visa. Okay. The very first esports player to ever get that to go into the States to play on an esports team was from Edmonton.
That is a cool story. We're gonna give Edmonton. We'll give Alberta props on that one. I'm super okay with Edmonton. I'm just being silly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but that speaks to the amount of talent that actually comes here, or that sort of we can develop here. But you just don't know about it again, right? So a lot of it is just telling these stories, and again, having those collision points, being able to talk to people. I could agree with you more. Getting those stories out there, and I don't know. Sometimes it's a Canadian thing, maybe it's an Alberta thing, but sometimes we don't sing our praises loud enough. Yeah. Too humble for our own good. Exactly.
Right. But I get it. But
nice sometimes.
We are who we are. Yeah. So when's the close? You have 150 people applied. Could I listen to this episode? This will be out in a few weeks. What's my deadline, or would I be looking at the next cohort? Yeah, definitely. So the esports cohort is going to be starting in March, so just a few weeks away from now. Yeah, this might be already live. This will probably come out. Someone's listening in the future right now to you and I talking. But we're mid-February, so probably miss that next cohort. Yeah. So esports is going to be March to May, and then film and animation that's going to be going from June until August. Okay, so a window there. Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. And then game development is going to be September to November again. So the goal, so you're keeping something going on kind of all the time, really, and spreading it out a little bit. Yeah, exactly, right. And we try to tie things to when are there events happening in different industries too, and how can we sort of collaborate and work with them too. What their natural cycles are. Yeah, exactly. And it's important that we get actual genuine industry engagement as well. Yeah. If we can actually get people, let's say, give them an opportunity to get to an event or something like that, right? Or meet some people sort of in industry, that's always more valuable. Yeah. The relationships you make have collisions. We've talked about it multiple times. Nothing much in life happens without a relationship, and the willingness of people in industry to want to see their industry grow, want to see new fresh ideas, fresh blood into it. Mm-hmm. I think that there's huge value to that. And I will again say, we've said it multiple times, we do that very well here in Western Canada. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Go to the website. Email you. What action should I take now that I'm inspired listening to this episode? Yeah, so definitely check out our website, Bow Valley Golf. Let me just double check that I've got the URL here correct.
which I should have had ahead of time here. But
I had one up this morning, but I wanted to make sure it's the right one.
yeah, it should be Nexus at Bow Valley College, I think.
Yeah, nexus.bowvalleycollege.ca, I think.
Yeah, perfect. So Nexus at bowvalleycollege.ca. Is there going to be contact information, or were you going to be sharing that?
Yeah, we can absolutely. We'll throw that on the episode for sure.
Okay,
no
cool.
problem.
Yeah. So you can email me too. Send me a message. There's an apply now link on the website as well.
Okay,
or come down to Bow Valley College, downtown Calgary, and check things out. We've got our esports arena open. Super cool. Always packed full of people. We'll be having some events there coming up too. The production hub as well, which I haven't really talked about too much, but the production hub is really exciting. It's going to have a volume wall, which is I don't know if you ever heard about like the Mandalorian, sort of the way that they like filmed that show and everything.
No,
but it's basically
I've watched the show, but I've never seen the behind the scenes.
Yeah, so I don't know the technical stuff that well behind it, but basically they use this new technology called the volume wall, which is like a super green screen, way more sort of fancy than that. But yeah, basically something like that. We're gonna have a dailies room, full broadcast and production suite, so you can do all of your like post production.
Oh, nice! You guys have
things like
that. A cool ecosystem where people can actually get their hands on the tools.
Yeah, exactly. And that's gonna be opening in April as well. So lots of really cool stuff happening at the college. Feel free to come by, check it out. We can always give people tours and see how people want to engage.
I love it. Ryan, thanks for coming on. That was super informative. Again, I'm never cease to be surprised at the things I run into that are happening in our city. And it just makes me more optimistic. I'm more excited than I was an hour ago.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
That was a pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.